go ahead and get started. And before I hand it off to Ruth, I just want to thank everyone for being here tonight. I just want to acknowledge that it's been kind of a crazy day. So I can understand if people are a little distracted. Anyway, welcome.
Welcome. I was thinking, Dave, too, maybe before we get started, because it has been such a crazy day, I appreciate everyone in the committee participating in our democracy. And I think maybe let's just take a moment of silence to recognize what has happened at our Capitol and to think good thoughts about our future. And with that, I'll call the meeting to order. It looks like we have a new roster that Joe has sent out to us, and we do have a few new members who've joined the committee. And I'd just like to welcome you. Maybe you can help me. I know Dave Burke is a new member on the committee, and this Michael Hendrickson, I believe. Are those the only two that we have that are new?
That's right. And I actually don't see David Burke in attendance tonight. If David, if you're here, maybe you could speak up for a moment.
So hopefully he'll be able to join us.
Yeah. Well, why don't we, I see Michael here. How about we do just a quick round of intros for TTAC members, just because we do have Michael here. And I'll go ahead and just read down my list and have people say hello. So the first person, well, I'll start off. My name is Dave Roth. I'm Tigard's Senior Transportation Planner and Liaison to TTAC. And then I'll start off with Kareen, if you want to say hi.
Hi, everybody. I'm not really at the coast. I'm actually in my kitchen here in Tigard. It's the same kitchen I've been living in for more than 15 years now. And this is my second year on the TTAC, I believe. Happy to be here and happy to see returning faces and new ones too.
Thanks, Corinne. And then next on the list is Carl.
Hi, folks. Carl Fisher, TTAC member from North Tigard.
And then Alan.
Hi, Alan Eckert. I've been on TTAC for just over a year now. I was on the pedestrian and bicyclist subcommittee before that for a couple of years. I live just a stone's throw from City Hall.
All right. George Brandt.
Hi there, I'm George Brandt. I'm a Tigard resident. I have been on the TTAC for about 3 years now, and I am also working to get a Master's of Urban and Regional Planning master's degree from either PSU or U of O, not sure yet. So welcome to new people, and nice to see some old faces.
Okay, Holly.
Good evening, everyone. So my name is Holly Kuntz. I've been in Tigard almost 5 years now, and I think this is my second year as a voting member on TTAC. Really enjoy being on this committee and looking forward to continuing to work with this team.
All right. And Joe, why don't you introduce yourself? I'm just going down my list here.
Joe Patton, Senior Administrative Specialist for the City of Tigard, and I staff the TTAC meeting.
All right, thank you. And then Council President John Goodhouse.
Yes, I'm here. And as of last night, I'm Councilor Goodhouse, and I nominated Councilor Lube to be a council president. So, but I'm here.
Okay, thank you for the update. Lindsay Wise.
Hi, I'm Lindsay Wise, and I live near Summer Lake in Tigard, and I've been on this committee, I think, 3 or 4 years now. Pre-COVID, I was a regular bus commuter between Tigard and PSU, and expect to go back to that sometime in the future. And I'm also interested in pedestrian safety and climate goals.
All right. And Lonnie.
Hi, I'm Lonnie. I'm a TTAC member. I've also a Tigard resident. I think I've lived here for 5 years. I was a daily commuter using public transportation. I've recently transitioned to my vehicle, and so I'm gonna get to live the crazy life of traffic, and I'm not necessarily looking forward to that, but happy to be here.
Okay, and then Michael, a new TTAC member for 2021.
Yeah, so I'm Michael Hendrickson. I live kind of over by the library and excited to see what TTAC is all about.
Great. Welcome. Richard.
Hi, my name's Richard Keast. I'm a landscape architect, used to be, now I'm a stay-at-home dad. I've been on TTAC for 2 years now. I'm the vice chair, and I'm excited to get to work on some of the fun things we get to do this year.
Great. And Vice Chair Richard, and then we have Ruth Harshfield, who's been our chair for the past year.
Yes, hi, I'm Ruth Harshfield. I'm a 30-year Tigard resident, and am excited to be on this committee and continue the good work that we've been doing. My background was in community traffic safety and child passenger safety, so it fits in with all of the efforts that we work on within this committee.
Thanks. And then Sarah.
Hi, I'm Sarah Serrata. I was an alternate last year, and I am now a voting member this year. Been living in Tigard for 3 years now, but off and on in Oregon since '96. Really excited to be back with everyone in this really weird, surreal way.
And then Serge.
Hi, I'm Serge. I'm a non-voting member, alternate on TTAC for a year now or so, former member of the pedestrian bicycle subcommittee. I live upstream from Lonnie on Dairy Dell in the middle of Tigard.
Great. And then Tegan.
Hi, I am Tegan Inlow. I am a senior project engineer in our public works department. And I am not an official resident of Tigard, but I live in the outskirts. I've been in this area for about 30 years. So I remember when Sattler was Sattler Farm and we used to go visit the chickens.
All right. And then so
David Burke's here.
Oh, welcome, David. Could you introduce yourself?
Hi, yeah, I'd be happy to. So I'm David Burke. I'm 25-year resident of Tigard. I'm a computer science researcher by day. And let's see, a few years ago, I served on the library board and was actually chair of the board for about 4 years. And so this is my first meeting. I'm very excited to be here because I think that you know, when I was looking at possible volunteer opportunities in Tigard, this is the one that I thought that could have the, you know, the greatest impact on quality of life in Tigard. So I'm thrilled to be here.
Welcome. Thanks, David. And
Muted, Dave.
Thank you for notifying me. So that does it for our members and the typical staff that join these meetings. We do have 3 additional Tigard staff members, and well, we've got Andy Newberry, Kenny Asher, and Nadine Robinson with us tonight. And I'll just wait until we get up to their agenda items before I introduce them. And I'm going to turn it back over to Ruth for minutes and public comment.
Great. Is Alan Eckhart still participating on the committee?
Yes, I'm still here.
Okay, I guess I missed you if you said hi. Excuse me. Okay, so we do have minutes from our meeting that was way back in November 10th, and I'm presuming that everyone has had an opportunity to review those. So Dave, since you did the roll call, how do you want to pass the minutes? Do we just go ahead and, anybody have any questions or comments?
Yeah, we can do that, Ruth, and then motion made, and then we can ask who approves. We'll hear everybody say it, and then we'll ask if anybody abstains or objects to them.
Okay, okay. So everybody's had a chance to read the minutes. Any comments or questions?
I move to accept the minutes as they're written.
Okay, is that Lonnie?
I second that.
Yeah.
This is Richard Keast. A second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Aye.
Any objections or abstentions? Okay, minutes have been accepted. And then under public comment, is there anyone on our phone line? Is that who we would have taking public comment?
We can't accept public comments via the phone line. They would have been submitted to Dave Roth.
Okay, do we have any submitted?
I received no public comments for this meeting.
All right, thank you. We'll move ahead to the Tigard Facilities Planning. You want to do the introductions, Dave?
Yeah, so with us tonight are Kenny Asher, Community Development Director, and Nadine Robinson. Nadine, I apologize, your Central Services Director.
Thanks.
Sorry, but welcome
No
both.
problem.
So Kenny and Nadine, if you want to just take it away, and sounds like you have a presentation to share with us.
We do, and thanks, Dave, and thank you, Chair Harshfield. I'm also going to introduce right away Kirsten Hauge, who is a consultant on our project team from Kearns and West Communications, and you're going to be hearing from Nadine and me and Kirsten in just a second. I'm going to open this just to say that we are before you today and really appreciate the time on your agenda with a project that is not necessarily a transportation project. It certainly has transportation impacts in our most multimodal district, which is our downtown. And so you may care about it for those reasons. But it's a really significant undertaking for the city of Tigard. And Nadine and Kirsten and I have been reaching out to the Planning Commission and other committees just to make sure that people who are really engaged with the city of Tigard are aware of this project that we call the City Facilities Consolidation Project. And we're going to be before the City Council with a feasibility report here in a couple of weeks. So this meeting is well timed. So we're going to run through our presentation, and hopefully we'll generate some questions, and you'll have some time on your agenda to be able to do some Q&A with us, but if not, that's fine too. We just want you to be aware. For those of you who I've met, there are a few of you. It's nice to see you again. I think you know that I work with Dave and Joe in the Community Development Department and have been directing community development in Tigard for the past 8 years. For those of you who I haven't met, it's wonderful to see you in this weird virtual way, and I hope that you will engage not just with the committee, but with this project as well, because it ultimately will boil down to what the citizens and voters in Tigard want to see happen. So with that, if Kirsten, if you can, are you sharing the presentation tonight, Kirsten? There it is.
Yes, I am. Can you see it okay?
Yep, take it away.
All right, great. Well, again, I'm Kirsten Hauge with Kearns and West. Really glad to be here tonight to meet with all of you. Today's presentation, moving to the next slide, will really just be an introduction to the City Facilities Consolidation Project, or as we're calling it here, the CFC project. We'll share some information about the project background, really speaking to the need for this project, how it came about, and some of the exciting potential opportunities that are also presented by the project, and why we are proposing taking action now, as well as our timeline and next steps. And then at the end, we'll close with some information about our community engagement, both our activities to date, as well as upcoming ways to get involved beginning later this month, and save some time at the end for your questions and discussion. So I'll pass it off now to Nadine to introduce the project.
Thanks, Kirsten. Good evening, everyone. I'm Nadine Robinson, the Central Services Director, and Facilities is part of my department. And so I've been lucky enough to be a big part of this project. Go ahead at the next slide, Kirsten. So for those of you who are longtime Tigard residents, I'm sure you've seen the city grow. I've been with the city quite a while, so I've seen it grow from like a 15,000 person city to what it is today. So it's been incredible. But as a result of that growth, the city's facing decisions about how to best invest in its infrastructure. And you probably know we have a new or refreshed strategic plan to make Tigard more walkable, inclusive, and healthy. And so we're looking for our investments to support those goals. And to that end, we're testing the feasibility of building a new public services building that would house most of city services. Thanks. So the City Facilities Consolidation Project would relocate the Tigard Public Works Operations Yard that is on the corner of Burnham and Hall, and we would move that outside of the downtown. And then we would be able to use that site to build a multi-story structure that would house the police department and then most of other city services. The project would also bring more housing to the downtown and potentially result in the skate park being relocated and enhanced. Another really nice element would be a parking structure, which would help support people using transit. Thanks, Kirsten. So project timeline, we've been working on this project since 2019. The city had identified issues with their police department, with their public works facility, and we were looking at how we could potentially replace those. As part of that, we started asking ourselves, well, is that really the best way to do it? You know, where we break it into individual departments and asks of the community. So we decided to take a broader look and started looking at maybe what the benefits would be of consolidating most of our services into one building. So it made sense to do that. So we took that to our city council in February of last year and talked to them about what we saw the pros and cons of this project or the feasibility of the project being, and they gave us the green light to move ahead. So since then, we've been in what we're calling phase 2, which includes determining the size of the building that would be needed, finding a site for the public works operations to move to, developing a financial assessment to compare the economic cost of staying in place in our current facilities over the next 20 years versus having to build new facilities. And as Kenny mentioned just a minute ago, we're going to be presenting those findings to council on January 19th. If we're able to get council's approval with that, we'll move into phase 3, which means that we'll be taking our plan out into the public and talk to our residents, get their input, and see if we can generate support for the project. The project team will be going back to council in June, and again to look to them to see if they still are supporting the project, and also potentially asking them to support a general obligation bond. Thanks. So why is a project necessary? Well, if you drive by city facilities, they look pretty good. You know, we do a decent job of doing the day-to-day maintaining of the facilities, but what you don't really see are the costly things, costly repairs, systems replacement, and those come with age. And so right now, some examples of what we're looking at needing to do are replace HVAC systems, roof replacements, replacement of sewer lines. We've got a lot of work we need to do on the asphalt in our parking lots, and those things just will continue to grow over time. And again, a lot of that is related just to the aging buildings. But I think of equal concern, or maybe even more, is that the facilities don't meet current seismic standards. You know, they were built back in the 80s, those codes have changed, and we've had the buildings assessed, and they're at risk of moderate to substantial damage in the event of an earthquake, which could result in significant life safety hazard. Along with that, it would really impair our ability as a city to execute and manage recovery operations after the earthquake. So it would really be to the detriment of the community. Next slide, please. So as part of the feasibility, we're evaluating what the best solution is for the city. We've been working with a consultant, again, to look at, do we replace these buildings individually? Do we act now? Do we wait later until later? And based on his findings, the consultant believes that the savings to the city of Tigard residents over time would be very significant when you start accounting for revenue from the sales and developments of the properties and the value of the new facilities. The net cost to the city for constructing the new facility would be about $148 million compared to $180.7 million to maintain the current buildings. Next slide, please. So the project can be funded without raising property taxes. Voters would be asked to approve an extension of the current property tax rate, and that could possibly happen as soon as November of 2021. So additional financing would also be needed, and that would come from a combination of things like utility rates, special revenue funds, photo enforcement revenues, tax increment financing, and land sale proceeds. And of course, the question is why now? You know, I think COVID's impacted all of us differently, most of us in difficult ways. But the one thing I think as a city that we've learned is that the unexpected can happen. A year ago, who would have thought we were going to be, you know, in a situation like that we have today? And the community has really looked to the city for assistance and to help them figure out how to navigate the unexpected. So we're ready to make this investment in the resiliency of the future to ensure that we can continue operations in the event of an earthquake. We also know that if we take action now, we'll be able to take advantage of lower construction costs and avoid ongoing repairs of our current facilities. Residents will see some cost savings. We can replace the facilities without raising property taxes if we can do this by 2025. So that also gives us kind of that little extra push to keep this project moving. Thanks. Kenny, you want to talk about potential opportunities?
Yeah, thanks, Nadine. I'm happy to. As you know, I have to warn the committee when I get rolling here. I know I always end up sounding like a salesman, and this is something of a sales job. But I have to tell you, it's a really easy one. I'll just start with kind of the conclusion. As far as like the city's leadership team goes, and that's who's running this project, it's not just Nadine and me, it's the finance director, it's the city manager, it's the public works director. I mean, we are all convinced that this is a smart way for the city to invest. Ultimately, it's going to be up to the council and to you all as voters to decide if you agree. But let me just run you through, in addition to what Nadine just described, which is we need an answer for all of the issues that we're facing with our existing facilities, which are kind of severe. She didn't mention the fact of running out of space, which is another one. In addition to all of that, you know, the city of Tigard is the largest landowner in downtown Tigard, and we are setting the worst example for the kind of downtown and the kind of city that we want to grow into. We are sprawled onto 13.5 acres with single-story buildings, very expansive parking lots, very terrible street frontage, no internal circulation, no connectivity really, especially on the Burnham site, to anything that's around it. In fact, what we have on the Burnham, on the public works site is a maintenance yard. So if you just kind of imagine what we want for our downtown, which is of course to be vibrant, active, multimodal, urban, interesting, you know, what we've got is a fenced off maintenance yard with, you know, Vector trucks and piles of materials. So that's a benefit of this project. We have so much property that if we can consolidate into a single building and structure our parking, we think there's room for approximately 500 new apartments. On the existing City Hall site, we're targeting 30% affordability. So that's, you know, 150 affordable units. 500 apartments, by the way, is 3 more Atwell projects, if you know the Atwell off Main project that we helped build with some of our other underutilized land downtown. And I think the committee understands that housing is necessary if we want to have other downtown development, if we want to increase the commercial presence of downtown, make it more of a, you know, more of a 12-hour or 18-hour place. And we're well positioned here, and it's exciting because Burnham is a street that's already been improved. It's a nice street except for the uses. If we can get a lot of activity at this end of Burnham, we've already got great stuff happening on the Main Street side. We've got Universal Plaza coming in between, the Atwell project. You can easily imagine that redeveloping this part of downtown would catalyze the whole Burnham corridor and maybe even beyond that. Other benefits, you know, a community room, of course, in the new building, the parking structure, which I'm sure you all can appreciate. We need to get away from surface parking. Downtown Tigard is not in a position to get away from all parking. Most of our employees drive to work, and probably most don't have that many alternatives to take other modes, even in the next 20 or 30 years. But bike parking for sure, connectivity to the transit that we do have. And the parking structure will provide, of course, space for downtown visitors, which, believe it or not, most people complain about downtown not having enough parking in it, which, you know, folks in your committee might wonder about, or maybe not. Maybe you've had that experience too. And, you know, we're a tax exempt use, the government. A lot of this housing would be taxable. That would be able to help fill the coffers of first the Urban Renewal District, then the City of Tigard's general fund and the other taxing jurisdictions. So we're just trying to upgrade the uses here and get higher and better uses on the land that we own. Nadine talked about resiliency. I think we've learned a lot in COVID about how one's relationship to one's city can change in the event of a global health catastrophe. And, you know, sort of related to that, I don't know if any of you have been through the police department. A lot of people have, because for several years now, the police department has offered tours of their facility to help people understand just how inadequate it is. It's undersized. It's also out of date, and there's some pretty scary things about not being able to control. I mean, I think we do a good enough job, but not being able to control evidence, and not being able to hire the kinds of officers that you might want because you can't offer an appropriate facility for them. So as we try to improve public safety in the city, the quality of our police department, which has always been high, is tied up in all of this. And the police are trying to find a new facility for the police. And this is a project to say, well, if you do that, you're leaving out a lot of other needs that we have across the entire city. So that's where the teaming up between departments and sort of this all-in-one approach began. So like I said, it's an easy project to fall in love with because there are many, many, many benefits. The question is, the sort of overriding question is it affordable? Is it economic? It's a very expensive project for a city the size of Tigard. So how does it stack up? So we've been working with an economics firm over the last 6 months to try to do an apples to apples comparison, which is hard to do, between building new and just continuing to invest in the existing facilities. And I say it's hard to do because no matter how much we invest in the existing facilities, in 20 years, they're still going to be 50 years old. And no matter how much we invest in them, we're not going to be able to grow them. We can't add on top of them because they weren't built for that kind of expansion. It's very expensive anyhow. And so we end up having to think about how we'd have to lease new space for the growth and how would that happen. Anyway, it turns out, according to our economist, building new is a smarter approach for all the reasons that you see listed there, and I won't read them. And it's not just a little bit smarter. We're talking about tens of millions of dollars in value that are created in surplus if we invest new, as opposed to try to nurse along these old buildings. One of which, the niche, would be abandoned in the event of a seismic, of an earthquake. And that paper, the memo from Johnson Economics, is about to be published for this council meeting. And if you're interested in the project, I would direct you to it. We can make sure that you get a copy of it if you're interested. Next steps. This is a pretty good timeline. This project is moving quickly because it has to, because as Nadine mentioned, time is the enemy of this project. The backlog of deferred maintenance just grows, and it grows with inflation. So does the cost of financing, so does the cost of labor. So it's sort of like, the way to think about this is it's kind of like the last call for Tigard if it wants to do this project without raising property taxes. And so we are, as we mentioned, going to council this month, January 21. Assuming that council is still on board with the project, we will continue with trying to secure a site for public works operations. That's in the works. We will also continue with preliminary design for both parts of the project, the city hall and police station, which is one part, and the new public works site and the buildings that they would need somewhere else. And that would be happening this winter and spring. In June, we would have wrapped up our communications engagement outreach. And I mean, we wouldn't have finished it, but we'd get to a point where we could come back to the council with a better cost estimate and with an update on where the community is on this. And we can ask the council at that point, do you want the project? Because if you do, it needs to go to the voters in November of 21. And believe it or not, to get something on the November ballot, you have to refer it to the county like in August. So that would be happening this summer. And then the critical dates from then are May of 22 to get the public works building under construction and to get them into that new building in the summer of 23 so that the city hall and police station's construction could start in the summer of 23 to get occupancy in the summer of 25. And we would move off of our existing site and it would be turned over for development. I think that might be the next slide. So the question about, how that redevelopment would happen. Well, if we get this, if this all comes together, we've got about 8 acres to work with on the site that we're currently on. We would do a master plan for that site. We would involve the community, your committee, etc. Figure out exactly what we wanted to see happen on the site that we're currently occupying. And solicit for a development team. First, we'd work with a planning firm, and then we would solicit for a development team to sell the property and have them develop it, most likely for housing, maybe only for housing, but certainly for housing that is affordable in the mix. That process, if we're on track, would get started like in 2022. So we're still probably 1.5 years away from starting that process, and that's if everything gets approved. Okay, Kirsten, I think you're going to take us home.
Great, thanks, Kenny. Well, as you've heard from Kenny and Nadine, this has the potential to be a really transformative project for Tigard. And so with that, community voices will be really important in shaping what this looks like for downtown. So to start, over the past few months, we've begun our process for communications planning with a lot of research to understand community perspectives and priorities to inform our approach forward. So that included meetings and interviews with both city staff as well as community leaders and stakeholders, including a focus group meeting with some Tigard business leaders and downtown interests. And from that, we shared our findings with city staff and used that to inform our proposed recommendations for communications moving forward. And so as we're moving to the city council meeting, post city council meeting, we're really opening it up for broader community input and perspectives, and we'll include several opportunities to hear from you, including having an online survey to gather input about community values and priorities to inform the design moving forward of the site. We'll have a project website that will be updated with engagement opportunities, as well as communications through social media and other city channels to get the word out, and continue doing briefings like the one today as a way to share about our progress and hear from all of you. So I will, with that, go ahead and open it up for questions, and we look forward to hearing what you think.
First hand.
Hi, this is Green. I was wondering, the memo that you mentioned, Kenny, would that include the information on the financing options? They kind of went past me a little bit faster than I wasn't able to kind of keep up on that. So
yeah, it does, and it's primarily a general obligation bond that would extend our current tax rate. So we have some borrowings that we've done for public parks and for the library, and those bonds are set to expire in a few years. We would continue with these new bonds. We would keep the rate that we have in place. We wouldn't have to add to it. That's the biggest chunk, but the rest of the financing would come in through utility rates, and some of those, actually all of those, would have to be raised, and some tax increment financing contribution, some bonded revenue from photo red light income that we're getting, and some special revenue funds like the building department would pay for its own space, that kind of thing. But yes, there's a list of sources and uses in that memo.
So as a follow-up, most of those funding sources make a lot of sense to me. What I might have questions about, and I could see other members of the public having questions about, is the utility rate increase and the red light photo, and how does that connect to the building?
Right. It actually connects really well because we use those utility funds to pay for the space that those utilities are using. Which is not something that we do today, but which is very standard and is part of rate structure. You put all the costs of your utility into that rate, and one of the eligible costs is, of course, space. We don't do that today. We would do that as part of the financing strategy for this project. I will tell you that you're not the first person to raise an eyebrow at that. There is controversy. I don't want to call it controversy. There's sensitivity, especially right now, about utility costs for homeowners in Tigard, and this is only going to make that harder. And so the council is grappling with that. So I appreciate the question, and I think this is a big part of the council decision making, and it will be for as long as we're in this project, because we can't do the project without that rate revenue, and we need to raise it. It's not, in my opinion, it's not a grotesque kind of like increase, but right now every bit counts. On the photo red light, we really haven't had any questions, and that revenue is coming in much higher than what we had initially forecast. And that's revenue that we're largely, Nadine, I think I'm right on this, we're largely collecting from non-Tigard residents who are abusing Highway 99. Is that fair? Or is that is that a myth?
I'm not sure that we've actually studied the zip codes yet to get a feel for where that's coming. But you are right that the revenue from that program, after it's paid for itself, will help pay for the police department part of the new building.
So then the connection really is the police department. It's police revenue. It's traffic enforcement. It's police revenue. It'll pay for the program, and then anything above and beyond that will pay for the cost of housing the police services. So I see connection better now. Thank you.
Yeah.
So we've got 3 more hands up, and we can take them in the order that I see them on the screen. So we've got Alan, Sarah, and then Lonnie.
So related to the pricing for the value of current City Hall police station land, are we just assuming that regional rail may not happen and won't affect rates? So you're assuming that the current property value of the land there is not going to fluctuate based on rail changes? Last time rail was coming through, that it could increase the value, which would really help a lot for moving stuff even just across the street.
Right. So our model has the land being sold at about $8 million. And we are disappointed not to have a nearby light rail station, if that's what you're asking about. The light rail station would have only helped. But I think more than it may have boosted the property value, the land value some, but where I think it would have helped more would have been the confidence and maybe pace with which new housing development would happen on that site. I think if light rail Southwest Corridor had passed and we had a station going in 2025, I have no question that that site would be sold and developed quickly. Without the rail station, I'm not worried that it won't sell or that it won't sell for the amount that we have programmed. I just think that it might get developed more slowly. So I think that's the bigger impact than the market value of the underlying property, because it's still very attractive to be close to Fenno Creek Park, and the downtown Main Street, the library, and everything else we have going in downtown.
And the second question related for right next door, and also for the Verizon Boneyard, or what's in there now? Is it Zipley that's in there now? Is there any concern for any kind of hazardous waste cleanup for those areas, and who would be on the hook for that? Would it be the buyer or the seller?
There's less of a concern on the City Hall site because of the history of the uses on that site. On the Public Works site, which the city currently owns and is going to continue to own, we'll do the investigations, we'll do the level 1, level 2 environmental review. And if we find something nasty, we'll be on the hook. We, the city, will be on the hook for dealing with it.
Is that built into the budget at all for it, or is it just kind of a side budget item?
There's money in the budget for due diligence. There's not money in the budget for any extensive remediation. So if we find something and it's expensive, we've got a problem.
Okay. Is that the only area that could be a problem then? That sounds like a problem.
I'm not even sure how to answer that. We've got a pretty good contingency built in, and I feel like there's enough money to do the project we've described, unless we run into a pretty bad surprise. And typically on a project like this, the one that you've just pointed out is the one that kind of kills projects. So, but we've been on that site for a long time, and we've done other environmental studies on properties nearby. We kind of know where the plumes are. We have a pretty good sense of where contaminated groundwater, at least groundwater, has migrated. So unless we find, again, like you say, hazardous waste, which I'd be very surprised to find, I think we'll be okay.
Okay, Sarah.
Hey, Kenny. 2 quick ones. I might have missed, how long would this bond extension of property taxes go? How many years?
It would be 20 years.
And is there anybody else who's in line for looking to see for more property taxes? Are there any other divisions within the city that is going to be trying to get a portion of that?
No.
Okay.
So, and again, this would be, the city could decide to borrow more for something else, of course. But the biggest needs we have that general obligation bonds tend to be used for are facility related, at least in Tigard. And with the fairly new library, if we can take care, we used to call this project the all-in-one plus project. It was like, we're taking care of all the departments plus public works operations. If we can pull this off, pretty much everybody will be taken care of.
That's, I think, something really important that you talk about with the public is that point, as I think that's what's really bothering voters. And the fact that utilities, I mean, our whole water system just went up. I think if you guys can get a really strong either marketing team or internally, I think that's the message to get voters to be interested.
Thank you. I believe the water rate increase that you're talking about is the increase that I'm talking about. It's not, at least water is not going to go up twice.
Got it. That's good to know.
Yeah.
Okay, Lonnie.
Good evening. Thank you for the information and thank you for the presentation on the CFC. I just want to say I am an advocate for this. I think that moving everything into a central location is a smart idea, and using the remaining property for housing is good, and particularly for affordable housing. However, that also brings me to the comment that I heard that the bond, in particular for the library, the level of the monies that property owners are paying will not change because it'll still be the same. But I can't help but think that with more people, particularly that close to the library, more use, and the library may be requesting another bond for operating, which would be yet another increase on top of the maintaining of the bond that's already there. And so I would be concerned about that as a property owner. I sat down and looked at my property taxes, and I purchased my property out here because of the reasonable property tax. But in the 5 years I've been here, my taxes have gone up $700, and I can't help but think the increase in utilities. The garbage is about to go up, and the water has gone up. The sewer is going to go up. The stormwater drain is going to go up. How much more, as a property owner, can we take? And so I really think it's important to keep an eye on that. This 20-year bond extension, yes, the library will likely need some more for more operating. The other thing is.
Well, just on that, Lonnie, just so everybody's clear, most of the library's operating revenues come through a district, the WCC, Washington County Cooperative Library District. And so Tigard is a part of that district. It's a larger tax base, and decisions about going out for operating funds are not made by the city of Tigard or by the Tigard Public Library. I'm sure you recall and have seen that there have been a couple of WCCLS bonds that have been passed in the last 5 years that I can remember, maybe 6. Mm-hmm. And so just so everybody's clear, the money that we're talking about would, I'd say there's zero chance that it would get redirected for library operations. But the point you're making about just rate fatigue and, the fact of having an expensive utility bill, like we talked about before, that's a real concern.
I appreciate that acknowledgement. I just think it's something for us to keep in mind. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Councilor Goodhouse here. I'll jump on the video real quick too. I think one thing to remember, and I know we've said this through the police levy and things like that. I think one thing we're facing in the city of Tigard is that there's with the different utilities and all that stuff, there's been a lot of things where I think a lot of stuff's been kicked, the can's been kicked down the road, or things have been put off. So there's things that finally come to fruition that we didn't necessarily plan for, plus a low tax rate. So I think that's why a lot of we're trying to figure out the best way to work on these things, but and still provide the services we need before it gets too bad. One of the things I think this year we're going to try to do as a council goal and our legislative agenda is still push on the state for property tax reform. And that's one of the biggest things I think really that faces us is why we have so many expenses where that I think needs to be fixed and adjusted, and more money that comes to the city would help us out. But it is something that does raise every time it comes to council is how we can do this and do what needs to be done, but also try to keep the cost to the residents down.
I can just make one last point. I know we're probably over time or ending, but this whole question about fiscal prudence, fiscal management, fiscal tolerance, it's all really important. The thing about these facilities that we need to continue to remind everybody is that you are going to pay. You are going to pay for these facilities. It's a little bit like if your sewer lateral breaks. If anybody's had that miserable experience, which I have had, you weren't planning on that in your budget. All of a sudden, you've got a $10,000 or $12,000 cost. That's what we're looking at with these facilities. It may not happen tomorrow. It may not happen even in the next few years. But this is a hidden cost to all the Tigard taxpayers and ratepayers. And we're just daylighting it and trying to manage it in a planned way, in a way that gets the most benefit out of what we're asking people to pay, as opposed to just continuing to pretend as if these buildings are going to be sufficient for growth and for seismic and for maintenance and for repair. And if you don't pay, you will be losing services. So I don't need to lecture the committee about that. I think you all understand that those trade-offs are real. And thankfully, we've got people like you who care enough about your local government to volunteer your time. And so we won't take any more of it. We really appreciate your time on this agenda and hope that you'll stay engaged with the project, because Kirsten said it, this one really could be transformational for this whole city.
Yeah, certainly it sounds like it. Thank you so much for your presentation. Anybody else have questions or comments?
I think Kenny's last message is one that I think I would agree is something that's important, and maybe it's something we could think about sharing is you can pay now or you can pay more later. But at some point we have to pay for our facilities, and that number in the PowerPoint that we would end up with generating, I think it was 13 million more in revenue by making this investment now versus kicking the can down the road. It sounds like it will be a cost-effective measure in the long run.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you all very much. Have a great meeting. Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Joe.
Thank you.
See you guys.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kenny.
Okay, so the next agenda item is Main Street, Green Street, 30% design.
Yeah, so let me just take a moment to introduce Andy Newberry, who I believe was here with Christy back in July presenting on this project, and I'm really excited to have Andy back because the project has made a lot of progress, and we have some pretty great drawings to show you. So welcome, Andy.
Hey, thanks, Dave. Again, I'm Andy Newberry. I'm an engineer with the city and the project manager for Main Street Phase 2. Here, I'll turn on my video. Again, I just want to thank you for your time this evening as I give you a quick update on our work for this project. So basically, we've had some delays to this project, specifically due to COVID. We were hoping to begin the business and public outreach shortly after the pandemic began, but we knew that businesses had more important concerns related to the pandemic to work through. Since we wanted their input on the design of the project, we held off on the outreach efforts. So basically now that some time has passed and to keep the project moving forward, we are now starting those efforts again. Our original schedule before this pandemic began, within the next month, we would be hiring a contractor right now. So we have recently met with the TDA, the Tigard Downtown Alliance, to go over the schedule and concept plan, and have recently stopped by each business along phase 2 to give them a project update. We also sent everyone or the business owners a survey that's basically asking about their thoughts on the concept plan, and that's shown on the screen right now. Concerns that they may have or other requests to help mitigate the impacts during construction. From that survey and the meetings with them, we basically came away with 2 takeaways. One of the main takeaways that we got was to begin supporting the businesses now and not just during construction. So we want to start helping those businesses now. Another takeaway is maintaining access to the businesses during construction and having sufficient signage showing accesses to the businesses is important. And there's ways of dealing with that. And one of the things that we're looking at is potentially doing some nighttime construction to limit the impacts. So right now, our public outreach consultant and staff are currently reviewing efforts that we can begin now to support the businesses along Main Street, and we'll be presenting that to the business owners shortly. We have some ideas of what we can do in terms of type of marketing efforts to, I guess, increase the foot traffic to those businesses, because we know there's going to be impacts during construction. So a little bit more about schedule. So again, due to the COVID delay, we are expecting to put the project out for construction bid later this spring. So it'll be late this spring, and with construction beginning sometime mid-summer, probably later July is what we're estimating. We do expect construction to last up to a year, but the bulk of that work will be, again, during the summer months. So that's a quick update on the schedule. Next, just want to talk about the concept plan that's on the screen now. One of the main themes that you'll see is phase 2 is going to look a lot like phase 1. So we're going to have all new sidewalks, all new pavement, new street lighting, sidewalk amenities. We'll have enhanced pedestrian crossings similar to phase 1. And a lot of the concrete areas are going to be turned into like landscape planters. And we'll kind of talk about that now. So starting on the top of the graphic that you see going from left to right, just to the right of the railroad tracks, this is where our project began. And right now there's an existing concrete island. We're going to be taking away most of that concrete and putting in some low height plantings there. At both legs of the Commercial Street intersections, we got some enhanced pedestrian crosswalks, and those are, a stamped concrete design similar to phase 1 again. We do have some curb bulb outs on that south leg of Commercial Street. That's for, specifically some pedestrian safety, right? So now they're crossing a street that has less length, so it's more safer for pedestrians. As we move further to the right, we are continuing parallel or the angled parking. One of the concerns that we heard from phase 1 and even phase 2 from business owners is we need parking. So we were trying to limit the amount of spaces that we decreased with this plan, and we only have a net decrease of 1 parking space. So as we continue further to the right, again, all that green hatching there, that's the landscape planter areas. And then you'll see a TriMet symbol. We have that blue hatching there. So early last year, we met with TriMet multiple times, and we came up with a revised bus stop layout. And this is basically a consolidated bus stop. So the existing bus stops on both legs of Commercial Street and Scoffin Street are getting combined into these consolidated bus stops. So it's going to kind of be like a mini bus plaza area. We'll have a shelter there, some benches, and we'll have those obviously on both sides of the street. Just to the right of that bus stop, we'll have another pedestrian mid-block crossing, and this is going to be one of your flashing beacon crossings, just like the one near Fano Creek as part of Main Street Phase 1. Moving down to the bottom of the sheet there, again, you can see that pedestrian crossing and the other side of that TriMet bus stop. More angled parking, landscape planters, and then we reach Scoffin Street, which again, we have enhanced pedestrian crosswalks. And then on Scoffin Street, we added a landscape island, again, kind of for pedestrian safety. We have like a refuge there in between the travel lanes. So that's kind of a quick update on the concept plan. Where we're at right now is our consultant, Century West Engineering, has produced 30% drawings, which is a continuation of this concept plan, and have put more design to it. And they have submitted that to the city, and we're getting comments back to them by tomorrow. Once they get those comments revised, we'll be sharing again with the TDA and the business owners. So. And again, the schedule-wise, we're looking at starting this next summer. So that's kind of a quick overview of what we're running with. And so we got time available for any questions that you may ask. Thank you.
So I see we've got Richard first and then Alan up next with questions. And then Kareen.
Do you know yet which landscape areas are landscape planters and what are stormwater facilities yet?
We're actually working through that right now. So yeah, our consultant's working on that now. That's gonna be part of the continuation of the 30% design to our 60% design submittal. But we're trying to maximize those type of areas because we have water quality treatment requirements from Clean Water Services that we have to meet. So I think a majority of those larger spaces, those will be the stormwater planters.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome.
This is Alan here. I'm confused by the entrance exit there at the dry cleaner. Is that like a one-way entrance at the intersection, and then you can only exit southwest on the opposite, the other way?
Yeah, so we worked with that business owner. We met with him a couple of times. So the access that's at the intersection, that's going to be two-way, and then we're just going to have a one out. So it's going to be one-way direction, that little angled piece there. So that's just going to be one way out to get on the main street. Yeah.
All right. Is there going to be any way to prevent people from turning left onto Main from that? I know it's angled, and you just now have people who drive. They'll probably still turn left out of that way. Because with what people do, you park under the awning, and then you can come out and want to turn around. So.
Can you show where we're at?
Oh, go ahead.
You have can you show with the little hand where he's talking about?
Hey Joe, that's your screen. Do you know where that's at? It's right at the intersection. Yeah, there you go. There you go.
I'm sorry.
Perfect. Thanks, Joe.
Can we zoom in a little bit too, Joe? I don't know if you can.
That's as far as
okay.
That's it. Sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah, back to your question. I think what we can do is put some signage there. We don't necessarily have room to put maybe like a curb median island there on Main Street to prevent that. But that's a good question that we might have to maybe pursue a little bit more.
And then the quick follow-up that, like, what were some of the major changes from the last version that we saw? Like, I know we saw something before. Was there anything that was really big that was different that I might be missing or maybe missed when you were talking about it? Or
no, the only major item that's changed, again, it's minor compared to the overall plan, is adding that landscape island on Scoffins.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is Crane. That landscape island on Scoffins is actually what I have questions about. So thanks for setting that up for me, Alan. I generally kind of love pedestrian refugees, but Scoffins doesn't seem like it's super wide. And there was also at one point a plan to paint parking, curbside parking on Scoffins to, inform people about, there being more parking in downtown than you might think, because as Kenny mentioned in our previous agenda item, people do really have lots of concerns about downtown parking. And I see like a median island potentially reducing your ability to provide on-street parking. But also I'm wondering, like, for freight making turns on Scoffin, is that a concern? Has that been, considered as part of the proposal to add the landscaping island in the central portion of Scoffins?
Yeah, so one of the things that our consultant has done is looked at truck turning templates, and this is a standard 53-foot trailer, and that turning movement works for folks or for truckers, making that turn on the Scoffins. So we're okay there. We had our traffic engineer, DKS, analyze this intersection and realize, based on the traffic, that we can just have 2 lanes there, and it works just fine for the function of that intersection. That landscape island just goes down just before that first driveway to McDonald's, so it doesn't extend beyond that. I know we didn't have parking there before, but in terms of additional parking in that area, that wasn't the plan with this scenario here. But
yeah, I think maybe I can jump in and speak to this.
Yeah, go ahead.
Karine, we looked at I think 3 different design iterations for trying to make for a more sort of pedestrian friendly crossing here. And this is the one that rose to the top out of those 3. And I think a couple of things. So the island doesn't extend that far down Scoffins, and so it would be possible to have some on-street parking down there beyond this. And I think just the benefits of having the reduced crossing distance and the opportunity to have a refuge for pedestrians outweighs the parking here. And the reason for that is because there's giant surface parking lots on both sides of Scoffins here. So at the where the Rite Aid is and the McDonald's on one side and the bank on the other side. So that we just didn't see this as necessarily the highest demand for on-street parking. But I am, it's helpful to hear that.
Right. Well, and it's, there's always been a bit of tension amongst, there are definitely some landowners that have plentiful parking options. And then there are numerous smaller businesses that really have 0 off-street parking to offer their customers. And so they really rely on on-street parking more. And it sounds like it's been considered, and there were some good reasons why that's risen to the top. So I appreciate the feedback. Thank you both.
So I see Richard, Lonnie, and then Serge with hands up.
Hi, this is Richard. So back to that Scoffins intersection and I guess it's the dry cleaner across the street. Am I seeing that right? We're combining a vehicle ramp and a pedestrian ramp without something separating them on the north side?
Yeah, that's what our consultant has shown for right now. Just based on that layout, if we skew, just looking at it, so we got that corner of the dry cleaner, that the awning there, that drive-through that they have. So we have the edge of the driveway lined up for that, and to keep a standard driveway with 2 cars being able to use that. That's how that crosswalk is blending in with that driveway there. Obviously, it's not ideal.
No, it's not. Is it possible to move that whole the crosswalk a little further to, I guess it'd be the east, and get a little more separation? Because
it's possible.
People are going to be driving all over the pedestrian ramp, and they're just going to use that as an extended drive aisle.
You're probably right on that. Yeah. So I'll talk with our consultant, see what we can do there, see what kind of layout that we can take a look at, and then maybe that's something, Dave, that I can have you take a look at also.
Yeah, let's talk more about that.
That's
I think
a good point looking at it.
That is kind of an awkward configuration there. And again, I'll remind folks, these are the 30% design. So we still have an opportunity to change things. So this is really good feedback. I think one thing is that walk aisle could be skewed or angled, away from the driveway. And then the other thing too is that and this is getting to Alan's comment earlier, potentially we could have some hardscaping up against that drive aisle that really would make it difficult to make a left turn out of there. But I think this is something we should look more at, see if we can come up with something.
Yeah, I think at least having a full height curb, between that driveway and the ADA ramp, I think that would help with that issue. So appreciate that feedback. Thank you.
So I see Serge, Lonnie, and then Michael. And unmute yourself.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I thought I was third on the list. So Commercial Street is at the far left of the project. The railroad tracks where Main Street crosses the railroad tracks. There's a major bike route that currently has a horrible dead end on the Main Street sidewalk, and I see this project seems to have nothing in mind for that either. I'm wondering, is there any way to resolve this? This beautiful 2 mile long or 1 mile long bikeway that ends nowhere, getting it into a part of a transportation for people that are trying to get from one place to another crossing Main Street on a bike. Right now it's pretty bad.
Serge, can you tell us where? So you're talking about Commercial itself, or?
It's the Tigard Street, which is off of the.
Oh, the Heritage Trail.
Off of the project, the Heritage Trail, right? Dead ends on Main Street, and then if you want to cross Main Street to go to Commercial, like I do or used to pre-COVID, you have to cross over the railroad tracks on the sidewalk. Okay, and then kind of dodge your way around the bus stop and sidewalk stuff to get to that crossing beacon, and it just seems like that maybe something could be done in this project too to help through traffic from Tigard Street onto Commercial Street, which right now it's really bad if you're on a bike.
Yeah, I think you raise a good point, and I'm thinking about it. It's been a while since I've made that crossing, but so if you're taking the Heritage Trail and you want to continue southbound, you have the option of either taking the path that's just on the west side of the tracks, or you could go over to Commercial to continue south. But if you want to get over to, either of those, there's a raised median in the way on Main Street. Is that right?
Right. Yeah, that's the thing.
Okay.
It prevents through traffic completely.
Yeah, no, that's a good call out. Andy, why don't we talk about that?
Yeah, Dave, one of the issues that we have with that area is ODOT rail. So they have an area that they basically can govern and basically tell you what you can and cannot do. And one of those things is having a crossing close to those tracks is something that they do not allow. So that's something that we'd have to discuss with them, Dave, if you want to look at possibly doing something in that area. But yeah, I see what the concern is. Yeah, it makes sense to have something right there, but I think the challenge is ODOT rail.
Well, let's talk more, because I think it sets up either you have to take the sidewalk on the north side to get over there, or I think what a lot of people are doing is they're crossing Main at the actual rail itself, which the rail folks probably don't like. So let's talk more.
That's what I do. That's what I do. I ride across because it's nice. It's a nice riding surface. If I can, I just bolt across. But of course, that's stupid. the stupid solution.
Well, and then Andy, can you tell us what's the project limits on the west side?
It's basically starting the railroad tracks. Other than right past Tiger Street, right past there's a pedestrian crosswalk there, and there's a large dip. And I don't know if you ever driven that we're getting in there and repairing that.
Okay.
It's at a catch basin. It's basically that subgrades failed. So we got some asphalt replacement there, but so we'll be in that area. So if we need to potentially do something to help this concern, then yeah, I'll be all for it. Just got to get the permission from ODOT.
Okay. Thanks, Serge. Okay, so I have Lonnie and then Michael.
Thank you. I wanted to just piggyback on Serge's comment about that particular place. I rode my bike from my home down the Tigard Heritage Trail, and I did book across there on the railroad tracks, and twice my tires got stuck in the track. And of course that was never fun, but that's part of the issue of the safety of getting across there. Is we'll do what we can, but you get stuck and then it's a dead end. I think that's could be a better design. I wanted to go back to up to Scoffins by the McDonald's there, and I've noticed there's a lot of postal vehicles, and the post office does have semi trucks that come from that corner, come from the east, and then go south on Scoffins. Is that median going to inhibit their ability to make that corner efficiently?
I think that's the point that Andy just brought up. The engineering team uses turning templates for trucks, and they'll clear that fine. I think it might look a little deceptively narrow there, but because the trucks are executing that turn pretty far away, there's actually quite a bit of clearance there for them.
Would it be just as easy going from Scoffins to Maine to the east?
Yeah, that turning movement was looked at too, and it works. Yep.
Okay. That's all I have.
Great. Michael.
So I actually had two questions. One was in regards to the biking or the bike crossing that was brought up. Is there a possibility for putting in like stop signs near the railroad tracks, or is that kind of a limitation of having it? Because I guess coming from my perspective, I bike with my two younger boys, and people on Tigard Street, that intersection, they just blow through it and don't even realize you're crossing. So I'd be probably more willing to go up if it was more safe.
So Michael, you're suggesting a stop control at Tigard and Maine?
Well, Tigard and Maine, or even like they're at Commercial. I don't know if that's a possibility.
Tegan, are you following this? Do you want to chime in on the traffic side of things?
Well, I can. So I'll chime in on the Tigard Street in Maine. So that was kind of a wish list for us, is to make that stop control, just because when you're on that intersection there and you're on Tigard Street trying to take a turn on Maine, a lot of folks stop on Main Street, and it's just kind of confusing. I've noticed it multiple times.
Exactly.
Yeah. But so we tried requesting that through ODOT Rail, and our traffic engineer said that this was something he could not recommend, and that was basically due to queuing links. So if you turn that intersection to a stop controlled, you're going to get backup of cars, and it was shown within 5 years that backup would extend onto those railroad tracks. So, and it would just progressively get worse over time as more traffic, more people. So the traffic engineer, it was something that he could not recommend us moving forward. So we abandoned that idea, but it was something that we wanted, but we just couldn't, back it up, sort of say.
Yeah, and I guess the question is it possible further down, or is that still an issue? Like for closer to the post office, I guess.
Yeah, so we would have to. So sorry, this is Tegan. We'd have to check the same thing and see if having stops there would cause the queues to get too close to the railroad tracks. The other thing is that putting in a stop sign is controlled by some federal guidance that has basically criteria for when it's appropriate to have one and when it's not. And the idea is that we wouldn't want to put it in a place where people would feel or perceive that operationally there didn't need to be one, because that can lead to people writing the stop sign, and that's actually worse. And so one of the things that we have to look at is what the conflicting traffic is. So how many people are coming off Commercial, how many people are on Main Street, and see if it actually qualifies to have one. And I'm not sure, Andy, you might be able to check and see if that was reviewed as part of the operations for the Main Street area. They could probably look at that in the model. I'm guessing that it doesn't meet, but it's something we could look at. But this area is going to feel really different post-construction. There's a lot of things going down here. We have tried to put in different crossing opportunities. We've got the RFBs along the area. So there are some things that we are working on, but we can take a look at, this intersection specifically if you would like.
Yeah. And then my second question is the detail around the post office, is it essentially staying pretty much the same as far as the entrances and exits?
Yeah, those locations are not changing, correct.
Okay. It was just kind of cut off on the edge. So that's my questions.
Okay, I've got George and then Councilor Goodhouse.
Hey, yeah, this is George. I was just going to ask, at the Tigard Street there on Main, would it be possible to put an RFB call box? So for those who don't have the confidence to try to stick their bicycle or foot out under the road, and because that intersection is definitely confusing for both pedestrians, bicyclists, and cars, because you've just dealt with that weird dip over the railroad tracks, and people are not really paying. There's too much distraction there for drivers. So would putting a rapid flash beacon with a call button for those people who feel like they need it be a more simple solution?
George, I think this is something we've been struggling a bit with the Tigard and Main intersection, because we're limited with what we can do because of the rail requirements. Tegan, do you know if an RRFB would be allowed there, given those concerns?
We would have to do the same thing where we would need to get approval from ODOT Rail. Anytime we make any modifications to that intersection, because of the proximity to the rails, we basically have to get approval. And an RRFB is traditionally considered a type of signal device. It's not the same as a full traffic signal, but it can kind of have a similar effect. It's kind of a gray area, right? Because a traffic signal or a stop sign, they're required to be stopped. An RFB, the idea is that it alerts drivers that someone's crossing in an instance where they would need to yield anyways. But I think that we could potentially get some pushback there as well. But again, that's something that Andy could kind of evaluate as part of the project. I was just trying to look in Street View, because I know that we have one. We have two on the corridor. There's one down by Curiosities, and then the other one is just slightly north of there, right? What is this cross street? Is that at Commercial? Where am I?
Yeah, commercial has one right here.
Yeah, so there's two on the corridor already. The other issue is that we have to be careful about not having them too close to each other or too many on the corridor. We try to put them in areas where we're going to channelize people, and get them to kind of pool and cross in one location. I think that potentially having 3 in that short span of block length would feel a little bit like maybe we had too many. So that would just need to be something we would need to look at too.
Thanks, Tegan. George, I don't know if you have any follow-up. You're on mute.
No, I just it's just that either we get rid of the train crossings, or we put in a 4-way stop there. That is probably my least favorite intersection in Tigard. Or another option is we block off the crossing off Main Street east-west, make it go down to there by the liquor store where the exit of the exit from the car wash is, and then put a RFB or a pedestrian call box there. Maybe that's far enough away, because that intersection, it sucks. The only time I've ever had any negative interaction with cars is that one, because there's just too much going on there, and people aren't expecting people, the pedestrian crossing there, even though because that trail comes out there, so bikes all of a sudden just come out of nowhere, so that it distracts you. And then in that intersection isn't really clearly marked whether it's a 4-way stop, a 2-way stop, or 1-way stop, or etc. So there's a lot of stuttering with people on the accelerator and brakes there, and you get to all these little jerky motions where then people realize it's not a stop sign, and so they keep going. And then people going the other direction, heading out of Tigard, are looking forward at the railroad crossing, and they're not watching. They're distracted by the railroad rise there and what's going on coming up. So you stand there watching, waiting to cross. You watch the driver's eyes. They're not paying attention to the brick crosswalk. They're paying attention further up the road. And then same thing with people coming back, coming down, heading southward direction. They're not looking at the cross street because there's just one cross street. So they're looking down at the next intersection of the liquor store. They're at Burnham. So that intersection is just is a problem because there's too much going on there already. So, I mean, in an ideal world, we do a pedestrian underpass or overpass, and that solves the problem with the people. But I'm assuming the rail system is not going to let you do that. It's going to be tight, and with ADA and all this stuff, it's a quagmire. But something has to be done there, because that intersection is just it's just not friendly to pedestrians or drivers.
Well taken, George. I think we recognize, and it's something we do get complaints about fairly regularly. And it's possible things could change in the future with rail, and potentially allowing us to do something different at that intersection. I think in the meantime, though, it's something that we can go back and talk a little bit more about. Maybe there's some additional pavement markings or striping that can help clarify right of way at that location. But comment well taken, George.
Yeah, and we're going to reach out to ODOT Rail just to kind of see what their stance is on activated pedestrian crossings there, as it was in our RFB, where it's more of a yield scenario as opposed to always fully signalizing. Just because that would be good information for us to know in general as well, because we have lots of locations where we're close to them and we'd like to be able to do things. So we will find out what their thoughts are on that as well, and if there's any opportunity to put something there.
So we have Councillor Goodhouse next.
Yeah, I thought I'd just jump on that one. I mean, as everyone else has said, that intersection with Tigard and Main Street. One other, and I don't know, someone said, one other thought I've had, I know that we can't put because I've asked about this before, like you were saying, we can't put a stop sign where it puts traffic over the railroad. But what about, because that's a T intersection, what about only putting a stop sign from the traffic coming from the other direction? So making it a 2-way stop there. So there's a stop sign on Tigard, and if people coming from the liquor store, there's a stop sign. So at least it has traffic stopping in 2 directions. and then the traffic that goes over the railroad tracks, that's a little easier for people to navigate through there. Is that a possibility of just putting in one stop sign in there?
Yeah, I mean, ODOT Rail wouldn't be concerned about that. I know, Tegan, if you've had experience with that type of intersection, I mean, that would help a bit, I would think.
And what if you mirror on the other side too?
Well,
Stop
people not when to. Oh, someone talking? Oh.
What if you mirrored that on the northeast side? If you're coming southwest, have a mirror stop sign, so it's just a stop sign for people coming towards the train tracks, and then it would be more consistent of a larger intersection and kind of raise the value of that that stop sign. I think that's a really good idea.
Yeah, because my thought is when I see people is when people are trying to turn from Tigard onto Main Street, there's traffic coming from both directions, so they have to try to gun it. But at least if they know that one side stops, then it makes it a little easier to navigate the intersection, and we don't have to worry about getting permission from the railroad.
I like this idea as well. This is Crean. I've always found that to be an unsafe and uncomfortable intersection. And kudos to Councilor Goodhouse for coming up with an idea that might best ODOT.
The other thing
It's definitely worth.
Oh, go ahead, Andy.
I was just gonna say, David, I think it's definitely worth maybe looking into more, unless anyone like Tegan or Dave, if you have an experience with that type of intersection. I haven't, so of that operation of that intersection.
I don't traditionally see it like that. Generally, we define it as you stop your minor approach or your major approach. So if we stop those two blades, we basically be saying that they're both kind of like minor movements, and we're prioritizing the major, which is the southbound on Main Street. I don't know that it's something that we could not do. It's not very traditional. So I think there's a little bit of research and consulting the codes that are applicable to see what they specifically say. So I think that's definitely something we can take back and do some research on and see, what options we have.
So we'll get back to the group. Maybe the next time Andy comes back to update us on the project. And I wanted to say one more thing on this. I think we've talked a little bit about the city of Tigard was awarded a TGM grant to do a land use and transportation study of downtown, and we're working on the scope of that project right now. And one of the questions that we've posed in the scope development is whether or not we should have a railroad quiet zone through downtown Tigard. And I won't get into all the details there tonight. We can save that conversation for later. I'll get the project manager for that project to come in and speak to us sometime this year. But railroad quiet zone requires these supplemental safety measures at all the at-grade crossings where the quiet zone exists. And if the city were to go that route, that could potentially solve some of our problems here, and maybe allow for a different traffic control at that intersection. So I thought I'd throw that out to the group. Okay, any last questions? We're a little bit over time. Any parting thoughts, Andy?
No, other than I just want to say thanks. There's some really good questions you guys had, and I got some homework to do, so I appreciate the feedback.
See one, George, last question.
Yeah, whatever happened to that project to put that build a building there on the empty lot next to the creek?
Oh, that's still moving forward. That's Sean's project. I'm sure you're aware, Dave.
I haven't heard much lately, but there has been talk of a project there for a while. New coffee shop.
It's moving forward.
It is, okay. Thanks, Joe.
Yeah, I staffed the TCAC meeting that Sean is liaison for. They they've got approval for their financing, the company that bought it, and they're going to be proceeding. They've submitted drawings and everything.
Okay.
Thank you, Andy.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Thanks, Andy.
Thank you, Andy.
See ya.
Okay, so I think I've got the next two items here, so I'll just jump in. Traditionally at our first and second meetings of the year, we recruit volunteers and nominate people to take on chair and co-chair roles for the committee. And over the last year, Ruth has been your chair and Richard has been the co-chair. And I thought we can do this one of two ways. We can recruit nominations or volunteers. I know there's already some interest that I've heard from, and we could take care of this tonight, or we can get nominations and vote between the January and February meetings and come back with a decision before the February meeting. So I'm open to however we want to manage this tonight. It can be fairly informal. And I'll just say the interest, I've heard it, there's interest from Ruth to continuing on the chair, and I believe also Richard in the co-chair position. So I'll throw that out to the group.
Yeah, that's correct. I'm still interested in the co-chair position.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks for asking.
I'm happy with our current leadership.
So I'm not unhappy at all with our current leadership, but I would also be curious in knowing if there was anybody else who was interested in serving before we decide what we're going to do. It might just be a really quick and easy process.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you raised that, Karine. I don't want to leave anybody out. And I think if there is interest from other folks on the committee, I think, we can, what we'd probably do then is have voting between this month and next month, and we'll just come back with a decision next month. And that's totally fine. I'm all for that.
Don't everybody go ahead.
I was going to say, not hearing any interest, I don't know if we need to make a motion or not, but if we need a motion, I'm ready to offer one that we go ahead and hold the elections to nominate Ruth as our chair and Richard as our vice chair.
I'd second that.
I third that.
So I think we'll pull the group right now then. Everyone who would like to vote yes.
Aye.
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 Okay. Well, I think it's unanimous. Congratulations, Ruth and Richard. It looks like you're continuing on for 2021.
All right, sounds good. That was easy.
Thank you for your service and your willingness to continue.
Especially in crazy remote management times.
The struggle. It's more
Okay.
fun when they can see your face.
Yeah. Well, who knows? Maybe by the end of this year, we'll be meeting in person again.
That's right.
Okay. Yeah. Well, let's go ahead and move on to the next item. And thanks. That makes, I think, everyone's lives easier to take care of that tonight. So this is great. The next item is our 2021 work plan intro. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here, and we're going to revisit the presentation that we gave to City Council back in December at our joint meeting. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
Excellent. Okay, so this is the agenda. So I'm just going to scroll down, and this is attached to the minutes in the agenda packet. So let's see here.
There you go.
Okay. So in the past, when we've done work planning for the group, we've ended up taking a bit of time as a committee to go over this. And I think what I'm going to propose tonight is that we pull together a small subcommittee or subgroup of TTAC to meet once between now and our February meeting to work on this with my support. And then we would come back to the February meeting with a proposal. So does that sound okay to folks?
Yep.
Okay. Excellent.
Yeah.
And then just to, go back before I go through the presentation here and the items that we presented at the end of last year, just to remind the group that, TTAC is charged with advising staff on a broad range of transportation issues. Specifically, the bylaws call for TTAC to help the city with implementation of our complete streets policy, helping advise on capital improvement projects, transportation system planning. I think you all know we're in the middle of updating our long-range transportation system plan, and so on and so forth. So we have some requirements by bylaw of things that we need to be working on. And then we also have something that's not been identified in our bylaws, but is something that was adopted last year, which is the city's new strategic plan. And I'd like to bring that into the fray here, and you see that on the screen as well here. So there's some specific transportation related actions within the strategic plan that are things that we're going to need support from TTAC on to implement. So let's go through this list, and this is what we presented to council for looking forward. So number one, obviously, complete streets policy implementation. We've been able to work on some of these things, but because of COVID, we haven't made quite as much progress as I think we've wanted to. But that's okay. We can get going on it and continue this good work going forward. Next one is the strategic plan, which I mentioned. And if you haven't looked at that yet, it's worthwhile reviewing. And if it's helpful, I can send out an email with some direction on the specific transportation related actions in there that you should be aware of. I'll warn you that some of these things are a little bit wonky, but you are the Transportation Advisory Committee, and there are things that you should be thinking about at a policy level. So there are some actions in there around vehicle miles traveled. And if you haven't heard that term before, it's something that you're going to want to familiarize yourselves with, because it's something we're going to be talking a lot more about in the next few years at the state level and locally, because it ties so closely to our climate emissions goals. So more to come on that. I'm looking forward to it. We've put some pretty cutting edge stuff in our strategic plan that some agencies aren't really talking about yet. So some exciting stuff coming there. Member participation on the TSP update. We have some great volunteers from TTAC. George, Ruth, and our former member Ben Gooley is sitting on the Community Advisory Committee for that. So you'll be hearing a lot more about the TSP update over the next year and providing input and hearing from your colleagues who are sitting on the committee. We included a note here about determining alternatives now that the Metro funding package was defeated at the polls. Who knows? There's a lot up in the air right now, especially considering what happened or what's happening at the federal level right now. It's possible that Southwest Corridor could come roaring back. So we'll see. Next page here. This is a bullet that was suggested by Richard, I think, and it's something that I think has been on a lot of people's minds, and you'll see language reflecting this in the strategic plan that was just adopted. So we want to update our member selection process, and I think probably the bylaws alongside that, so that TTAC better reflects Tigard's racial and socioeconomic diversity. That's something that's really important for the city right now, and something that we're keenly focused on. So we'll have some work to do there over the next year. And then next one was just a continuation of being a sounding board for city staff, like you've been tonight. Your input and guidance is super helpful for us as we're developing projects and ideas and policies for the city. Next one is updating the CIP project selection methodology. So the direction that we're going to be going as a group will be a little bit different from what you've experienced with the CIP in the past. Rather than voting on individual projects, what TTAC will be helping with is updating the actual process and prioritization criteria that we use to select projects. That will create a more equitable and stable process going forward for selecting capital projects. So there'll be work to do there. There's a goal for improved communication with other Tigard boards and commissions. I think this is a great idea, and I think we had a little glimpse of this tonight where I didn't know that the project was moving forward at the moment, but thankfully Joe sits on or supports multiple committees, and so he can share that information. So it'd be great if we can start figuring out ways for the different Tigard boards and commissions to communicate better with each other, to share the good work they're doing or what they're involved in. And then finally, continue raising and prioritizing transportation needs in light of changing travel patterns around COVID-19. So, there's a lot in flux right now, and I think, we can think about, we can think about transit. We can think about people's driving patterns and behavior changing. We can think about safe routes to school. What's going to happen when kids start going back to school within the next year? How are they going to get there? And then also thinking about projects like our pilot project, where we created the Streets for People signage around Fano Creek, just north of downtown. I think it'd be great to have TTAC support if there's interest in doing an expansion of that in the spring. So we'll have a little bit of time this winter to prepare for something like that. So that's just my summary of what we've talked about with council, and what's been on my mind. And I thought so my proposal is that we get some volunteers either tonight or within the next week here, so that would be willing to meet and take some of these ideas and concepts and put them into a usable work plan to carry us through 2021.
So I'm certainly willing to work on that, Dave. This is Ruth.
Great, thank you, Ruth. So it'd be great if we could get, maybe like 3 TTAC members who would want to help participate.
Joe, I'll volunteer.
Carl
Or Dave,
okay.
sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And Kareen, I see your hand up.
Yep, I'd volunteer.
And then Sarah. And Sarah, you're on mute if you're talking.
No, wasn't talking.
Okay, so I've got Ruth, Kareen, Carl, and Sarah. Were you interested or?
Yes, I am
Oh,
interested.
awesome. Okay. Unless there's anyone else, I think that's a good size group to help work through some of this stuff. Certainly open if anybody else wants to join us.
So next step, Dave, then is to just figure out a time when we can do a video meeting.
Yep, we'll do another video meeting between now and the February meeting, and put something together to share with the committee in February.
Great. What I may do is look at our list that we did in last year, that we ended up not really using, but as a format that we can kind of go from.
Yeah, and certainly I hope, if there's, if we do need to make a format change, or if we want to, investigate, how some other similar committees operate in terms of developing work plans, I'm definitely open to that, because it's kind of a fine balance of, taking on a reasonable amount of work while also leaving time to have flexibility for project presentations and other activities as they come up, because we don't always know exactly when those things will come up. So okay, thanks you guys. Yeah.
So it sounds like we'll be looking for an invite of some sort, maybe a doodle poll or something to find out when would be a good time to meet between now and the next meeting. And we'll have that conversation, probably setting aside, I don't know, an hour or two. And then we'll come back to the group next month with kind of a draft work plan for people to comment on.
That's right. Exactly. Yep.
Great.
I think I just heard your group leader.
And doodle is my poll of choice, so that's what you'll see coming your way. Okay.
All right, that looks good. So what we have then would just be if you want to read it, you got non-agenda items that you'd like to share with the group.
I've got a couple. As per usual, I've got a couple. I think one that I wanted to share with the group was something that Tegan and I had been working on up until the Christmas and New Year holiday. We submitted a grant application for funding through the ODOT Arts program, which is the All Roads Transportation Safety Program. And it's a funding source that I believe we've used in the past for things like street lighting and other types of improvements. And they had an open call for a round of funding kind of last minute at the end of the year. And we jumped on the opportunity and submitted an application for funding to support crossing improvements at where the Fano Creek Trail crosses Hall Boulevard. So I think most people here are probably familiar with that crossing. The road is fairly wide, quite a bit wider than the travel lanes. And there's a pedestrian activated flashing beacon overhead, but it's an older style that's not necessarily the most visible thing for drivers. So we've been pestering ODOT about this crossing for a couple of years at least now. It has significant crash history. with at least one really severe pedestrian injury within the last couple of years. So we're hoping that we'll be successful in this award for funding, and we'd be looking at likely doing a hawk signal, which is the 3 round light that turns red and requires drivers to stop for pedestrians. So I wanted to share that with the group that we did submit that application. And I think that's probably all I have to share tonight with the group. So,
Dave, can you, with the survey that we talked about in November too, with the map where people could go in and put down concerns?
Oh yeah.
Have you gotten good response? I've seen a lot of signs around, to promote it, but I didn't know what kind of public response you have.
We have, I don't have the final numbers, but we just, this is for the transportation system. Oh yeah, Tegan just reminded me of something I need to share with you. The transportation system plan, we're doing our engagement with the community right now via this online open house for the early part of the project to help inform the existing conditions report. And so we had this mapping tool. It's still live and you're still able to provide input on it. I know quite a few of you have actually gone in and provided input. So thank you very much for that. We're going to be using that to inform the TSP update. So I think it was just on Monday of this week, we submitted the input that we've received to our consultant team. So I haven't actually seen a report yet. It's in process, but I think within the first few months of this year, we'll be able to share with you what we've been hearing for people. We did have really good turnout and participation on that. So I'll be excited to see the report when it's ready.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, so Tegan wanted me to remind or share with the group that we have another engagement opportunity for you right now. And this one, we've talked about this previously, probably about it might have been even over a year ago, but there was some legislation at the state level that would allow for neighborhood speed reductions within cities in Oregon from the typical 25 mile an hour posted speeds down to 20 mile per hour posted speeds. So you're seeing that a lot in Portland right now. And the city of Tigard provided input to the state legislature in the form of a letter from Mayor Snyder. And that legislation did pass, and now we're in the process. Tegan's leading an effort right now to look at where we would implement this in the city. So what parts of the city would we prioritize first? And we have an engagement site that was just launched to get feedback from people. So it would be great for you to look at that, to provide feedback to us, and to share it with your friends, families, and neighbors. So I'll make sure that Joe sends a link out to the group with the website address, and happy to answer any questions about that if you have them right now. And if not, that's fine. Yeah.
Yeah, we had just talked about maybe, around school zone areas and that kind of thing when we talked about it at the last meeting. So if we can get that link, I think people would want to participate.
Good. Okay. We'll send it out.
Okay. Anything else from anybody? Sarah, do you have something you want to share?
Yeah, well, I have a question. Right before, I think it was the end of the year, we were talking about a grant that you guys were applying for that would take care of some of the area around Metzger School, putting in a sidewalk. Was that grant still being reviewed, or were we awarded or denied?
I couldn't remember if I informed you that we were awarded the grant from ODOT. Yeah, so it's great news actually. Sorry if I didn't tell people tell TTAC this, but we submitted 2 Safe Routes to School infrastructure grant applications to ODOT, and one at Templeton and one at Metzger. And we were successful in our Metzger grant. You'll hear more about this. We can sometime this year we'll come in and share the concept design. Well, we're not at concept design level. We have some concept sketches right now, but essentially it completes the sidewalk on the north side of Locust Street between where it ends just west of the school all the way to Hall Boulevard, and then creates a new crossing right at the school. So
that's
pretty
fantastic.
exciting project. Yeah. So we'll bring back more details once we start working on that project in earnest.
Great. Well, it looks like we're at 8:30, so we got a lot done.
Yeah.
If nobody has anything else right now to share.
Ruth, I had one thing.
Yeah, go ahead, Lord.
So the Fennel Creek Trail Alignment Study, I think you can still go and add feedback to that. So if you haven't done that, if you have time, look that up. There's a particular little spot they're trying to get some feedback that's on Bonita between the apartment complex and the commercial building on the other side. And when we had our meeting about it, I had suggested looking into floating the pathway over the river, kind of like they have on the East Side Esplanade. But instead of having it floating, have it cantilevered over the river. Because I went by that site the other day and I noticed that if you try to build it on the apartment side, they lose a significant number of parking spots, and also really constricts their driveway, which means it'd be difficult for people with U-Haul trucks and stuff like that, maybe the garbage people. So
Hey George, I want to be careful about that. That's kind of a big assumption before we've actually seen design work. So just be careful with that assumption.
Yeah. I'm just saying, we had talked about it and they thought the idea was interesting, and they were going to take it back to their group to talk about flying the pathway over the river, over the creek part of the way. So, but anyway, I think you can still go to the site and look at the design sketches and comment on it. So if anybody has time or wants to do that, please do.
I think that's a good point, Dave. There is still a lot of input coming for that and the different versions of what that path should look like.
Yeah, I think what I just want us to be cautious about is it's an alignment study at this point, and we're not even close to getting into design. So we don't know a lot of these impacts until you actually study it in detail. So let's not assume, impacts to driveways or quantities of parking until we actually get to that level of design to influence a project. So let's just be careful about that.
Correct. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. Well,
okay.
Wishes to everybody. Stay healthy, and we'll be meeting the first Wednesday in February, and probably getting some other information out to you before then.
Thank you.